Holy crap. What a Sunday and what a Monday it's been so far. Welcome into Pucks and Brews, everyone. As always, I am your host, Michael Sparacino, alongside Liam the Chellmaster Gottimer. This is going to be a loaded episode. So before we get to anything, Liam, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Shades. I mean, there are a lot of things on the docket for this episode of Pucks and Brews, and that's my main focus right now. And of course, as always, it's great to be back with you, and I'm ready to talk some hockey.
Yeah, so a lot of shit happened. This is a double coffee kind of day. I got my large ass cold brew right here because I'm gonna need
As
it.
a as a non-coffee drinker, I got my water, the infamous bottle. Infamous is not the right word. The famous bottle that I bring every episode. I always mix up those two words. Excuse me.
Hmm. Yeah, so I had a coffee about I want to say like 3.5 hours ago, and this is the second one because this is a loaded episode. Uh, all right. I guess without further ado, let's start off with some fun stats and some other stuff. So, but first off, cheers.
Cheers.
Ah, all right. So,
Here's
like I
too low.
said,
Nothing.
it was a holy crap, what a Sunday. Double coffee kind of day. Shout out to Rick Bowness, the current coach of the Winnipeg Jets, for coaching in 5 decades now, which is just insane. Now, is it 5 actual decades or is it across 50 calendar years?
You're asking the wrong person. I do not know,
All right,
to
I'm
be
not
honest.
even
But
going to bother researching.
what I can tell you is he's had an outstanding career. And he kind of had a career resurgence on the head coaching side with the Dallas Stars, taking them to the Stanley Cup final in 2020 in the bubble. And it's not easy to get your group motivated in an environment such as that. And I think that attests to Rick Bowness's coaching ability. And he's coached the Winnipeg Jets to the top of the Central Division, right alongside the Dallas Stars. Hasn't gone well lately, but good
We'll
for him.
circle
And
back to that.
we will.
Next up, Patrick Marleau getting his jersey retired by the Sharks. I didn't see the whole ceremony, but on the MSG 150, they showed a good joke about Joe Thornton that made me laugh.
Yep.
Next up,
Congratulations to Patrick Marleau, of
yes,
course.
yes, indeed. And
Well deserved.
and also looking forward to Joe Thornton's number being retired by the Sharks as well, hopefully soon. Next up, we have John. Oh, what's up?
On that note, do you remember when John Tortorella had the spoke about Joe Thornton?
Oh, yes, he hasn't won a damn thing in this league.
Just brought me back to that. It's a great moment. Miss Torts.
Torts is a quote machine. I love it. So moving on to goalies, we have John Gibson, the goaltender of the Anaheim Ducks, recording 350 save games in a month. The first goalie to ever do that, according to my friend Joey. So take that with a grain of salt. I didn't double check. And moving on to another cool goalie stat, we have Linus Ullmark of the Boston Bruins scoring a goalie goal, the first one of the season. Too
Yeah,
bad it wasn't
that was
Igor.
awesome. That was the next words out of my mouth, Shades. Too bad it wasn't Igor, indeed. But again, and as far as John Gibson is concerned, I think it's interesting because I think the Ducks, they could potentially have a trade deadline piece that they could sell off in John Gibson or Anthony Stolarz for that matter. The tandem is drawing a lot of interest from around the league. Gibson's been really good, especially as of late. And, teams around the league, respect his ability and know what he can bring to a winning team. So you never know. Goalie market is thin right now. So I just wanted to point that out.
And also don't sleep on John Klingberg. But if anything happens, we'll talk about it next episode. For Rangers fans out here, we got the 7-year anniversary today, Monday, February 27th, as we're recording, of Dan Girardi getting the puck caught in his visor in what was almost a very bad moment, turned out to be a pretty funny one. And it makes me smile every time I see a video of it.
Yeah, what an insane moment that was. And again, I was speaking to you on the phone prior to the start of the podcast, and I said I vividly remember, watching as a kid, Dan Girardi getting the puck right up in his visor. And since that moment, Shades, I've seen very few moments that, can compare to that in terms of oddness on the ice. That one stands alone for me. Very cool.
Yeah, thank God it was oddly funny and not oddly weird.
or it didn't hurt Dan Girardi either.
This is
Like
very
it
true.
just got stuck. That's good.
Thank God. Thank God. Next up, we have Shea Weber becoming a Coyotes legend. That's exact. You heard me right, Internet. Shea Weber becoming a Coyotes legend because the Montreal Canadiens traded his contract. Oh, excuse me, the Vegas Golden Knights. I forgot that trade even happened. Traded his contract just to get it off the books to the Coyotes, and they basically also gave up a 5th rounder for Dyson Mayo. I butchered that. I apologize, but that happened, and again, that I just find that funny. Next up, the Senators dumped Nikita Zaitsev's contract, which is not too shocking. They ended up dumping Zaitsev and a 2023 second and 2026 fourth for future considerations. So entire cap dump. Jack Johnson is headed back to the Colorado Avalanche, which, hey, good for them. He won a cup with them last year. Didn't do anything with the Rangers, but he won a cup with Colorado. Good for him. Maybe that'll put Colorado over the top again. Who knows? That would also be pretty damn funny, not going to lie. And in terms of the small trades, before we go deep diving into all the big ones that happened over the last 24 plus hours, Keith Kincaid, Rangers legend, got traded from the Boston Bruins to the Colorado Avalanche for Shane Bowers, who was once a pretty highly touted prospect, who I'm assuming has fallen off a little bit, considering he got traded straight up for a backup goalie. Liam, your quick thoughts on this?
Yeah, Shane Bowers. I mean, I had the same thought in my head. I haven't gone back and looked at his career stats, but in the moment when I saw his name pop up in the exchange for Keith Kincaid, I remembered him as, like you said, a former highly touted prospect. So maybe they find something in him with the Boston Bruins. Everything seems to be going right for them this year, so wouldn't be surprised. And as far as Keith Kincaid, pretty sure he was the starter in the AHL, so that's a good opportunity for him as well. So.
And to lastly finish off this gigantic intro of episode 37 of Pucks and Brews, we have Spencer Knight, goaltender of the Florida Panthers, or I should say backup goaltender of the Florida Panthers, checking himself into the player assistance program. So I hope to God everything is okay with him. I hope he gets through whatever he's dealing with, because you never want to see any player go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy that Spencer Knight is getting the help that he clearly needs. There's been videos surfacing around the NHL, social media, of Spencer Knight just doing odd things, during warmups, maybe indicating that his head is not all the way there. And if it isn't, the Florida Panthers, it's best for him and it's best for the team that they separate for this time, and Spencer Knight gets the help that he needs. And, again, this is a young goaltender, and you can hope nothing but the best for him, because we want his career to go well from here on out.
Now, that was a lengthy intro, the biggest and longest intro we've ever had on Pucks and Brews, Liam. And we're only getting started. So everyone watching and or listening, grab a drink of choice, whether it be alcohol, coffee, water, I don't know, wine, even that's alcohol. Anyway, whatever drink you may please. If you want to make yourself a drink, go for it. I got my cold brew. Liam's got his water. And, well, this is going to be a loaded episode, so everybody sit back, enjoy your drink of choice, and let's hit it. But first, I must take a ginormous sip of this cold brew, and cheers once again, Liam.
Cheers, and I'll do the same with my water here.
Here we go.
Drop it in the chat, water or FT.
So after a gigantic trade, and after a long time of speculation on Timo Meier possibly heading to the New Jersey Devils, the trade finally happens, and it is not just a big trade. It is a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 piece trade. Holy crap, I thought it was only like 10. Anyway, so before we say anything, let's say the full trade. The New Jersey Devils acquire Timo Meier at 50% salary cap retention, which Meier going to the Devils in general, not shocking, but the trade finally happened. They also get Scott Harrington, who has since been placed on waivers, which I find hysterical. Zachary Emond, Santeri Hataka, Timur Ibragimov, and a 2024 fifth-round pick, which is originally Colorado's. I'm butchering names, most likely. I apologize, but I legitimately don't know who half these players are. And San Jose gets Andreas Janssen, former Maple Leafs legend, Fabian Zetterlund, Nikita Okotiuk, Shakir Makumadulin, that name I know for a fact I got right, a 2023 conditional first-round pick, a 2024 conditional second-round pick, and the almighty essential 2024 seventh-round pick. The conditions on the picks being the 2023 first being if the pick is a top 2 selection, New Jersey will instead transfer their own 2024 first-round pick. That ain't happening. It's going to be a 2023 first-rounder. And on the second pick, the 2024 conditional second, if New Jersey makes the 2023 Eastern Conference Final and Timo Meier plays in 50% of the games, or New Jersey makes the Eastern Conference Final in 2024, the pick becomes a 2024 first. So this might end up being a second-round pick because I think there's teams better than the Devils, just my personal opinion. And should New Jersey transfer the 2023 first to the 2024 first, as it is top 2 protected then, and they make the conference final in 2024, San Jose will receive their 2025 first. Jesus Christ, that was a mouthful. The overall biggest piece of the trade, Timo Meier is officially a New York Devil, and the San Jose Sharks got a haul.
New York Devil?
Did I just say that?
You said New York Devil.
Jesus Christ. The New Jersey Devils got Timo Meier, and the San Jose Sharks got a haul. This is why I needed a second coffee. My brain is still trying to wrap around this. Liam, the floor is yours.
No worries. It's a huge trade, Shades, and good on you for getting, 75% of those names right. Maybe 100%. I don't know because I can't pronounce them either. I mean, Makumadulin, that's impressive. Nice. Rolled off the tongue well. But of course, the Devils, they acquire the best player in the trade in Timo Meier. He was the biggest fish on the trade deadline market. And Scott, the GM, Fitzgerald, brings him in. And he gets some prospects as well. I mean, Scott Harrington, like you said, he just got waived. You get a 5th-round pick. And, I mean, look, what he gave up, it wasn't Simon Nemec. It wasn't Luke Hughes. It wasn't even Alexander Holtz. But it was a haul for this player. And, I think the key here, Shades, with this trade is that this does not come with an extension for Timo Meier. There's no certainty that the player is going to stick around. I mean, of course, they have restricted free agent rights, which should provide, a little bit of a security blanket for the Devils. But still, this could end up being, a 1-2 year, thing. So this, could potentially not be a long-term relationship between the Devils and Timo Meier. And as far as what they gave up, Fabian Zetterlund is a very good two-way winger, and he's young. So I like him. He's not the main piece in this trade. I think Makumadulin would identify as that. He's a top defensive prospect. He was a former first-round pick. Andreas Janssen, he has some NHL time under him. Probably kind of cut and dry of where he's at. Okatuk, I have no idea who that is. I have to be honest with you. A 2023 first-round pick. Again, 2023 draft is stacked. And if the Devils are a first-round exit, that could be between 21 and 23. That's something that be pretty cool. So for the Sharks, and they could have a nice turnaround quickly getting a top end prospect there. So, but I also think the Devils do well in having the Sharks retain 50% of the salary as well. So I think it's a good trade for both teams. I think the conditions are a little bit ridiculous. I don't know why the Devils would ask for a top 2 protected pick in this year's draft. They're going to make the playoffs. I mean, are the Devils really, not confident that they're going to make the playoffs, that they have to, protect those top 2 picks? That's a little bit questionable. But yeah, besides that, it's a good trade for both teams. Devils get the best player in the trade, and they get their big fish. We spoke about it on last week's episode, Shades. The Devils saw the Rangers get Vladimir Tarasenko and Nico Mikkola, and they saw the Islanders acquire Bo Horvat, and now they go out and acquire their man, Timo Meier. And, I think it was a foregone conclusion from the start that he was going to end up a New Jersey Devil. I think anybody that you talk to around the league or, likes to talk about hockey, would tell you that Timo Meier was going to be a Devil by the time the trade deadline was over. And we see that come to fruition. So good for them and tough for the Rangers, our beloved New York Rangers.
Yeah, the night before the trade happened, which was 2 nights ago at this point, it was rumored that Vegas and Carolina were also in, but I never really found either one of those two teams to be a serious threat to land him. I think, like you just said, me and you always thought it was going to be New Jersey, and here we are. And with placing Harrington on waivers, the Devils, only Meier and Zetterlund and Makumadulin, who, this is an interesting one, he is playing in the KHL this season.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, the only 2 players currently on a roster, NHL roster, are Zetterlund and Timo Meier. So basically, this is a whole bunch of minor league players and prospects and draft picks. So, yeah, you're right. It is 100% a gamble.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, the Devils got Timo Meier.
Yep. The Devils got Timo Meier. They got the best player available at the trade deadline. Cut and dry.
Yes, and like you said before, there is no extension in place at this time. The Devils actually technically can retain him after the season. That is going to be a monster extension, but that is a whole other thing for another day. And I'm very surprised that the Devils were able to keep all of Nemec, Sharangovich, Mercer, Bratt, Boquist, and
just
Alexander Holtz. I was surprised that they were able to keep literally all of them.
Yeah, that's a good job by Tom Fitzgerald. I'd also like to note that Makumadulin is number 5 prospect in the Devils system. So, again, it's a prospect pool that's definitely heavy towards the top. But Makumadulin, that's good for Tom Fitzgerald to give up a player, not towards the top end of that list. And Okatuk, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I'm almost certain that I am. But he played in the NHL earlier this season with the Devils, so he has NHL experience under his belt. So does Andre Janssen. So the Sharks are getting some players that can help out right now. And I'd also like to know, I think that the reason why Alexander Holtz was not a part of this trade wasn't because the Sharks weren't interested in him. I think he's been hurt in the American Hockey League. I think that the Sharks didn't want to trade for an injured player. And if you'll remember, Shades, initially what happened was that the trade was being held up by a player who was injured, and I think it was on the Devils side. So, that could have potentially been Holtz, and he could have been replaced by Makumadulin. You never know. So maybe that could be a precursor to the Sharks trading Erik Karlsson, trading for a top-end defensive prospect. Maybe reading between the lines there.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, I do remember hearing something about the injured player on the Devils holding the trade up. So you're 100% right about that. But what this makes the Devils is frankly, let's face it, a better team because they get an elite winger who is capable of scoring 35, 40 goals to a already young and talented fast team. So this makes them all the more heavy and scary come the Stanley Cup playoffs.
I know we'll go through it throughout the rest of the episode, Shades, but man, the East is
just stacked.
It is, yeah. Stacked is the word.
Yeah, so Timo Meier, a New Jersey Devil, in a monster trade. And by monster, I mean 13-piece trade. So just insanity. And now we move to another trade where another monster haul, Tanner Jeannot, of course, traded from the Nashville Predators to, of all teams, of course, the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they get defensive prospect, Cal Foote, a 2025 first round pick. Yeah, a 2025 first round pick, which is a top 10 protected conditional, because of course, why wouldn't it be? A 2024 second round pick and 2023 third, fourth, and fifth round picks. Jesus Christ. That is a haul.
Jesus Christ part 2, right? Just talking about the Timo Meier trade and how extensive that was. I mean,
Seriously.
the Tanner Jeannot trade, same thing. I mean, but this one certainly more lopsided than that trade was. And look, Tanner Jeannot is a playoff type player. And Tampa Bay Lightning in the last few trade deadlines have not shied away one bit from trading for players like that. And you know what? They've gambled. Remember, they gave up 2 first-round picks for Brandon Hagel. So they gambled big time.
And before that, they gave up 2 first-round picks each. Okay, well, 1 first-round pick each, 2 in total for Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow. And it paid off.
All 3 of them paid off. And, Brandon Hagel is on the top line playing with Braden Point right now. He's a top line player. So, I just want to point that out there. And Tanner Jeannot is a player who's having a down season. He had an insane shooting percentage last year, a career year last year, of course, in his rookie year. And, he's 25 years old. He's at an affordable cap hit of $800,000. And that the Tampa Bay Lightning are cognizant of that. And I think it was very interesting that Julien Brisebois came out today with a statement saying, look, I understand that we gave up a ton in terms of draft capital, but what's important here is that this team is ready to win now. And the matter of the fact is the player that we draft in the summer is not going to help the team next year win a Stanley Cup. And you know who is? This player. So, yeah, was it a king's ransom to give up? Yes. But, the Tampa Bay Lightning have not shied away from a move like this before. And I wouldn't be surprised if it worked out in their favor, Shades.
Oh, no, I wouldn't be surprised either. They've won 2 out of the last 3 cups.
And Nick Paul, too. Just want to add him to the list. Last year, getting him from Ottawa. You know how good he was in that Eastern Conference final? I know you do. I mean,
yeah,
he torched us.
Yeah. Yes, he did, especially in Game 6. Oh, no, excuse me. He also torched Toronto in Game 7, which, again, hilarious.
Love that.
And, again, like we said, this was a massive haul for Nashville. Tampa is not afraid to make these kinds of trades, as we all know. They've done it multiple times in the past, and with their window being wide open and them winning 2 out of the last 3 cups, being in the final of all 3, I mean, can you really blame them? Not really.
Not at all. And I think the Predators absolutely nailed this deal. And,
they killed it.
Trotz, we'll get to this, but Barry Trotz, is joining the front office of the Nashville Predators. And I think that he might have had an influence in this move alongside David Poile. And David Poile would be nuts to not accept this trade offer from the Lightning. And I bet it was Julien Brisebois who reached out. I bet he had his eyes on this player for a very, very long time. So good for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm very interested to see how it works out. And we'll get to the Maple Leafs because this potential first round matchup between 2 and 3 in the Atlantic Division, holy smokes. We got some good hockey on our hands with the moves that are being made.
Yeah, and a very interesting note, Tanner Jeannot's cap hit is $800,000, and he is a restricted free agent at the end of this season. Time will tell if Tampa re-signs him. But speaking of trades that... Oh, what's up?
Nick Paul, he was re-signed by the Tampa Bay Lightning to a $4.15 million cap hit. So I think that's comparable to what Tanner Jeannot could get. Just wanted to point that out. So his cap hit's 3.15, but his salary is 4.15.
All right. Well, like we said, this is a great pickup for Tampa. This is a great haul by the Predators. Again, we've said this on the show before, where Blake Coleman at the time, well, actually, Blake Coleman was worth way more of a first-round pick than Barclay Goodrow was. Was that an overpayment by Tampa? Oh, absolutely. Did it pay off for them? Yes. Could it pay off for them again? Yes. Is this also a massive overpayment? Yes. So
I think,
yeah, but when you've won 2 out of the last 3 Stanley Cups and you've been in 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, I don't think the fan base cares if you overpay for this type of player.
And all their top end guys are locked up. And,
Yep.
these bottom six players are solidified, especially if they re-signed, Tanner Jeannot. Corey Perry keeps coming back on 1-year deals. Like I said, Nick Paul just got extended. Ross Colton, is on a rookie contract. I believe he might be a restricted free agent at the end of the year. And those are all crucial bottom six players who have really been good for them. And if you look at their last few years, Shades, during their, of course, 2 out of the last 3 Stanley Cups, look at these bottom six players that have come through the Tampa Bay Lightning and have exceeded elsewhere. Carter Verhaeghe with the Florida Panthers, Yanni Gourde with the Seattle Kraken, Blake Coleman with the Calgary Flames. His cap hit might not be great, but Barclay Goodrow with the Rangers, so you look at all of these guys, like, They, the Tampa Bay Lightning know who they're picking up, and they're not going to overpay if it's not going to be a player who is going to significantly improve their roster. And I think Tanner Jeannot is going to do just that.
Before I move on to the other trade involving the Nashville Predators, I saw Steve Dangle mention something on his podcast, which is, don't get me wrong, it's funny, but it's also scarily true. He said, if you get a phone call involving a trade of a prospect that the Lightning picked early with one of their first 2 picks in the draft, hang up the phone. Look at the guys that they've traded away. Jonathan Drouin. I'm going to have to look this up because I don't remember all the players off the top of my head. But Jonathan Drouin, Brett Howden, Libor Hayek. This is just to name 3 highly picked draft picks by the Lightning. But he basically said, it's just like, if the Lightning are offering you a trade with a highly picked prospect, hang up the goddamn phone. And he's not exactly wrong.
Yep. No, he's not wrong at all.
I mean, it's actually scary. I'm just trying to
Pretty
find...
crazy, but yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm just trying to find one more trade involving.
Oh, and also, just before we move on from the Lightning, just this trade real quick, I think we should mention Cal Foote. They also got a nice prospect too, on the back end. Good for them. We know how the Nashville Predators like to develop defensemen. Just putting that out there, especially if they try to move Matthias Ekholm at the trade deadline, which they're rumored to do. So, see.
Yeah, and one more guy that they picked was Nolan Foote that they traded away. So, moral of the story, if the Lightning are offering you a prospect that they drafted within the first 2 rounds, hang up the damn phone. Scary, funny, but true. And just to bring up the second trade on Nashville's end that they made yesterday, no, excuse me. It was
Niederreiter.
Yeah, this was a few days ago, if I'm remembering correctly. Where the hell was it? Oh, yeah. Nope. I literally just... Here we go. This happened 2 days ago, so this happened on Saturday. Nino Niederreiter got traded to the Winnipeg Jets for a 2024 second-round pick. I think that's pretty good value that Nashville got in return. The Jets acquire kind of a pain-in-the-ass middle 6 forward, which I think is something that they needed. What are your thoughts on this?
What do you say? I'm sorry. I got a text from my boss one more time.
Oh, no worries. Niederreiter goes to the Jets. They get basically kind of a pain in the ass middle 6 forward who has the ability to score, which is something that, in my opinion, the Jets needed. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Niederreiter is a good player. He's a good 2-way player. He was with Carolina, and he was with Nashville, and I think he's going to, do really well in Winnipeg. And, Winnipeg needs some more depth in their forward group, especially in their bottom 6, defensively and offensively too, 2-way players. So, and I think they bring in exactly that in Niederreiter, and good for the Predators too, to get a nice return. They just keep accumulating draft capital, you never know when you're going to hit. And the Predators have a lot of opportunities to do that in the next couple drafts. So,
and speaking of the Predators draft capital, this is from a tweet I saw, which is all factually correct. The Predators have turned Tanner Jeannot and Nino Niederreiter into a 2025 first, a 2 2024 second round picks, a third, fourth, and fifth round pick in 2023. So 6 picks total, and defensive prospect Cal Foote. That is phenomenal value for those 2 players. So Nashville killed it.
Phenomenal, and it's taking advantage again of Tampa Bay. Willing to overpay for the player that they want. So good for them. Good for David Poile too, and good for the fan base. It's been a little bit of a tough year, and they're gonna get better quickly, hopefully. So
yeah, I think they will too. And last but not least, on the Nashville Predators, I was going to save this for later in the episode, but it makes more sense to bring this up now since we just talked about 2 trades involving them. Barry Trotz is coming in to take over for David Poile as the GM of the Nashville Predators, who is retiring. And Barry Trotz, after not getting into coaching this last year, ends up back where he started in Nashville, but this time he's taking over as general manager, effective June 30th. Basically, good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. And David Poile is the only general manager in Nashville Predators history. One guy, David Poile, for every single year that they've been in existence.
Which is impressive.
Which is extremely impressive, and what an incredible run for him. And I got to be honest with Shades, I'm a little bit surprised that Barry Trotz didn't return to coaching. Had a lot of success with the Islanders, but maybe this is something that he wanted to do later in his career. Always wanted to get into the front office, has an opportunity to do that with the team that he started his coaching career with. So again, like you said, I'll echo your sentiment. Good for him.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I'm very glad that he won his Stanley Cup with the Capitals and not the Islanders.
100% agreed.
No, but with the way he's coached over the years, I think I can say that I'm pretty confident that he'll be at least a decent general manager.
Agreed. And, like I said earlier, you never know if he had a little bit of influence with this trade alongside David Poile, while he can't take over in the role officially, maybe David Poile can kind of show him some pointers. And, there's a good opportunity right at the trade deadline, selling, to kind of, show him the ways and how to execute trades and get the return that you want. And Predators did that in both their trades.
Yep. And while it looks like the Predators might be headed for either a mini rebuild or a retool on the fly, I think they're in good hands.
I think they're in good hands too.
All right. So staying with the trade, staying with some trades, we have another trade involving the Toronto Maple Leafs, this time involving Jake McCabe.
Mm-hmm.
The full trade being the Toronto Maple Leafs acquire Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty, a conditional 2024 fifth and a conditional 2025 fifth. 2024 and 2025 fifths, there's too many conditions. The conditions being the 5th round pick transferred to Toronto will be the lowest of the 2024 5th round picks that Chicago owns at the time of the draft. And in return, the Blackhawks get Joey Anderson, a minor leaguer in Pavel Gogolev, a 2025 first round pick, conditional being the condition being top 10 protected, and a 2026 second round pick. So basically, the most important part of this trade is the Maple Leafs get yet another defenseman, and the the Chicago Blackhawks acquire yet another first round pick. They have, unless I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that they have accumulated 3 first round picks so far for the 2023 draft. And yeah, they're hoarding picks. Good pickup for Toronto. Good return for Chicago. Your thoughts, Liam?
Yeah, I think that this is masterclass by Kyle Dubas. I think in the span of 10 days, he has gotten Ryan O'Reilly, Noah Chari, Jake McCabe, Sam Lafferty, and they have not lost a player off of their roster not named Joey Anderson. I mean, in Kyle Dubas's potentially his last chance as Maple Leafs GM to do something significant and save his job, because Shades, So help me God, he is going to get fired if the Maple Leafs lose in round one. I guarantee you that. This is his last chance. And especially with Austin Matthews, his unpredictable future, he has to put together a playoff battle-tested roster that can go through the Tampa Bay Lightning in round one. And I think adding Ryan O'Reilly, who's having a down year, but man, he's looking good with the Maple Leafs. Noah Chari, he's proven that he can be a bottom six player that can excel for your team in the playoffs. Shades, Jake McCabe is arguably a top pairing defenseman. He had a plus rating with the Chicago Blackhawks this season.
Impressive.
I mean, and if you look at impressive, and if you look at his advanced analytics, it certainly favors, his game. And Sam Lafferty as well, a bottom six player. I think he's a center, guy who can win faceoffs, bring speed, like a Tyler Mott type guy. Like that's a really nice addition too. So Dubas has really done good work here. And as far as Chicago, good for them getting some more draft capital. I mean, right along the lines with the teams that we've been talking about, Shades, that have, really been struggling. And, like you talk about the Nashville Predators, like we just spoke about, so good for them. And I think Chicago, they're not done yet.
No, they are not, but
hopefully
we'll circle back to that. I just need to mention that Jake McCabe also came in at a 50% cap hit retention. So he is only a $2 million cap hit for the Maple Leafs, and that is for the remainder of his contract through 2024-2025. And the Maple Leafs still have approximately $2.7 million in cap space, so they may not even be done yet, which is kind of impressive.
I mean, yes. And I'm ready to make a hot take, Shades. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are ready. If their goaltending stands up, I think with the rosters, the way they look right now, I think that they can beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think that this team is far, far better than the team that lost in 7 games to Tampa Bay last season. And I know Tampa Bay has improved, but the depth that the Toronto Maple Leafs have put together, it's battle tested, it's playoff ready, and it's Tampa Bay Lightning playoff ready.
I got to be honest with you. I don't think that's much of a hot take because, look, the Maple Leafs lost in 7 and had a chance to win the series in 6 last year. So I don't think it's that much of a hot take.
All right. And the goaltending has to show up.
This is also very
true. If the goaltending doesn't show up, they will lose.
But time will tell.
Indeed.
So the trades just keep on coming. And next we have the Washington Capitals trading Dmitry Orlov in a 3-team trade, the full trade being the Washington Capitals trading. I don't even know how to explain this. So it was a 3-team trade involving the Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins, and the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild, the only reason they were in this trade was to retain half of Dmitry Orlov's cap hit from the Capitals, and they also got a 2023 5th-round pick out of this. But the Washington Capitals trade away Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway, and Andrei Svetlikov, his signing rights, and they go. The Bruins get those 3 guys. The Washington Capitals get Craig Smith, who I was very surprised was involved in this trade, going to Washington. They get a 2023 1st-round pick, a 2024 3rd-round pick, a 2025 2nd-round pick, and it also says from Minnesota, Andrei Svetlikov. So I'm not exactly sure what happened. I'm not exactly 100% sure what happened there.
I think Minnesota retained cap.
Yeah, they retained 50% of Dmitry Orlov.
So that's probably the player they got in return.
Anyway, so that is basically Svetlikov is the minute detail of this trade. The Washington Capitals traded Dmitry Orlov basically and Garnet Hathaway for a 1st, a 2nd, 3rd, and middle 6 forward Craig Smith, who I can honestly, like I said, was honestly surprised he was involved in the trade. I can see Washington flipping him before the deadline. But what are your thoughts on this overall trade, mainly Boston getting Dmitry Orlov and Hathaway?
Well, Yeah, so good for Boston. I think Garnet Hathaway and Dmitry Orlov, Orlov are two pivotal players that you'd like to have in the playoffs. I mean, Garnet Hathaway is an excellent bottom six player. Dmitry Orlov is a top four defenseman, and we saw how much, top four defenseman and bottom six wingers by that, for that matter.
You could also
Are
argue that Orlov is a top pairing defenseman.
You could. You certainly could. So Boston got a lot better. And, when I said earlier in the episode that the Eastern Conference is just absolutely stacked, Boston making this move, is right up there with that. And, we just talked about the Tampa Bay Lightning and how much better they got with Tanner Jeannot, at least in the present, maybe not for the future. We spoke about the Toronto Maple Leafs and how this could potentially be their year. And we haven't even discussed the Boston Bruins, who only have 8 regulation losses on the season and just added one of the best bottom 6 players in the league, quite frankly, in Garnet Hathaway. I mean, really, he's an impactful player, and both Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway were excellent in their Bruins debuts. And like you said, Dmitry Orlov is a top pairing defenseman. And look at that defensive core for Boston. I mean, Hampus Lindholm is having a career year. Charlie McAvoy is Charlie McAvoy. You add Dmitry Orlov to that, that's an embarrassment of riches, especially when you have Linus Ullmark, who is a Vezina candidate, and the forward group that they're able to put out there. And let me just also note, Shades, I'm not surprised that Craig Smith was a part of this deal. It had to be done for cap. Craig Smith is making $3.1 million. And I think from Washington's standpoint, I don't think that they necessarily just want to throw in the towel at this point. I think if any indication of our beloved New York Rangers facing the Capitals on this weekend, they still got a lot left in the tank. So, adding a player like Craig Smith who can help in the now is good for them. But also they get draft picks, draft capital, and they need that because the Capitals, quite frankly, have the worst prospect pool in the NHL. They do.
Yeah, so looking at Smith's stats on the year, 4 goals, 6 assists for 10 points in 42 games, which is a drop off from what he's been doing the last several seasons of his career. So now that you mentioned that you're not surprised. I shouldn't have been either. But just to throw out 2 more names on Boston's back end, Brandon Carlo and Matt Grzelcyk. I mean, Jesus, this is such a stacked team this year, and they just got stronger. And I'm very glad that you brought up Washington selling. I wanted to ask you this. Do you think that they should go full on sell mode? Because I don't think they have a single defenseman signed past this season.
Happens once every episode.
The mute button strikes again.
The mute button strikes again. But yeah, no, for the Capitals, yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Just to clarify, they do in fact not have. Well, I mean, John Carlson's on long-term injured reserve, but other than that, they do not have a defenseman signed that is currently active on the roster past this season. And they have 2 RFAs in Martin Fehervary and Alexander Alexiev.
Well, I think for the first time in a long time, Shades, the Caps have indicated that they're ready to sell. And I think Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway, just like their, valuable additions to the Boston Bruins, they were key parts of this Washington Capitals team. And, now they're gone. And Alexander Ovechkin, I think there is a little bit of the mentality of wanting to do right by the player, but I think you got to do what's best for the team at this point. And what's best for the team is maybe rebuilding or retooling on the fly as best they can, and, aiding Alex Ovechkin's chase for goal 895, so that's kind of where I think that they're at. And I think, it's kind of surprising when you said that they only have 1 defenseman signed after this season. Who's that? Just John Carlson? How many years does he have left on his deal?
Like 3 after the season, and he's currently on LTIR.
Yeah. So their back end has to be recouped a little bit for sure. I mean, they have Dylan McElrath in their top 6 throwback.
Rangers legend,
baby.
Ay, Dios míos. Yeah, so basically the Capitals basically sold off on 2 very good players, and frankly, they got a pretty good return.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, so a first, second, third, and Craig Smith. Boston gets Garnet Hathaway and Dmitry Orlov to already add to a stacked team.
And, let me just also add, just in the broader perspective, bigger picture, I think just sellers at this trade deadline are getting excellent value for their players just everywhere around the league. I mean, if you look like we said, Nashville got for Nino Niederreiter and Tanner Jeannot, this trade as well with the Washington Capitals, so there have been some very good returns for sellers at this trade deadline market. And I'm very interested to see if that's a precedent for how this week goes along, because I wouldn't be surprised if some teams are just looking at themselves in the mirror and say, we're on the fringe of making the playoffs, and are we really going to win the Stanley Cup this year, or should we really tank and go for one of those top 5 picks in the draft? I texted you about it earlier. Connor Bedard, Michkov, and Fantilli, they're all potentially franchise altering players. So I wouldn't be surprised, if you look at some teams that are on the playoff bubble. But just interesting side note.
Yes, and we will circle back to the playoff bubble in just a couple minutes. Might be like a half hour or so, but who knows? So
never know.
So the last of the trades, at least big trades so far, there's a lot to unpack here with the St. Louis Blues, because there's a lot going on, first of all. But to bring up the trade that they made, Ivan Barbashev got traded to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for center prospect Zach Dean, who was a 2021 first-round pick, drafted 30th overall. So basically, they get a highly picked prospect, and Barbashev, who, let's be honest, after last year was having a pretty down season this year. He finished last season with 60 points. He is on pace to finish this season with maybe 40, maybe 45. So if you're asking me, like, on the surface, I think that St. Louis got pretty good value here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I did. I think St. Louis got very good value for the player. I think Ivan Barbashev is one of the most underrated players in the league, quite frankly. And I think Vegas, when they saw the writing on the wall that Timo Meier wasn't going to be an option for them, and that New Jersey was, at the head of that pack, I think they had to look elsewhere. And I think, again, for the remainder of this week and heading towards the trade deadline, I think Vegas is going to make more moves like this, where they add players that aren't necessarily, like game changers like Timo Meier would be, but just nice little small additions that can, help solidify or tape up holes in their lineup, whether that's on their back end or in their forward group. And they did that with Ivan Barbashev. And for the Blues, again, they got a nice return here. And I like Zach Dean. Zach Dean is a really nice prospect. He played really well in the QMJHL with the Gatineau Olympiques. Oh, my French isn't great, but he had 51 points in 2022, and he had 52 points as a defenseman. So 24 goals this past season. Played in the World Junior Championships in the under-20, and he had 3 points in 7 games. And took 33 penalty minutes in 7 games. A lot.
Hey, I think this is still pretty good value for the Blues. So, like I said, we had a lot to. Yeah, they basically got a first-round pick for Ivan Barbashev, which that's great value right there.
And Vegas just keeps trading away their prospects, man.
They do. I saw it. One of my friend Joey brought up a stat. I think he said either 5 of their first 6 or 6 of their first 7 first-round picks, I think they've traded. It was something along the lines of that. I'm not getting the exact wording right, but it's something along the lines of that.
And you know what? It hasn't bit them but outside of one occasion.
Well, I mean, it's going to catch up to them.
Nick Suzuki, that's the one. It's going to come back to haunt them for Pacioretty, who they traded away for nothing. But I digress.
Yeah, so like I said, more than one thing to unpack here with the St. Louis Blues. We also had, on top of that trade, which was the most recent thing to happen, we had Craig Berube basically calling out the team's leadership and, let's face it, the entire roster in general, I don't have the entire quote on me, but he basically said the team is playing with no heart and no passion. And Robert Thomas did not take too kindly to that in his response. I'm going to let you handle this one.
I mean, it's a pretty absurd statement to make as a coach, to be honest. I mean, do you not see what has happened to your roster? You know, I mean, the team chemistry is way off because you just took away, pivotal pieces to this team. No Nico Mikola, no Vladimir Tarasenko, no Ryan O'Reilly, no Noel Achari. All of these guys, were big time pieces in the St. Louis Blues lineup. And for Robert Thomas to come out and say, you know what, and push back on his head coach's comments, good for him. Good for him. Good for Robert Thomas.
Yep, exactly. And I think this is the writing on the wall also for Berube not being the coach too much longer.
I could see that happening as well, but I could also see there being a good amount of interest in Craig Berube. I could. Stanley Cup champion.
He is a Stanley Cup champion, but I think he's served out his shelf life with the Blues. The Cup happened 4 years ago, and let's face it, the Blues haven't really done anything of note since.
Yeah. I mean, they had a couple good seasons there, but this past year, it hasn't gone too well. And very, very much could have been a disconnect between coach and team. Never know.
Yeah. So, last question about the Blues before we move on. Do you think that the Blues should basically go full on tear it down rebuild at this point?
No, because I think that there are foundational pieces there. I think Jordan Kyrou is a foundational piece. I think Robert Thomas is a piece that's going to be great for the Blues for a long time. You committed to Torrey Krug, for the next 6 years. So you might want to try to build something around him as well. Colton Parayko is extended again for the next 5 years. So there are pieces here on this team, and Jordan Binnington, as much as a interesting character that he might be, he's still their starting goaltender, and that's where they're at. But I don't think they're going to go into a full on rebuild. I could see a retool on the fly here, but I think good for them selling for right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're a pretty good team next year. Not a playoff team, but on the fringes, they could rebuild something in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, they probably are going to have some cap space to do something. But just to correct you on one thing, Parayko, 7 years, 7 more years, not 5.
7 years.
Yeah, but as long as Jordan Binnington is the goalie there, I do not see good things happening to this team. Because frankly, I don't think he's that good.
Again, Stanley Cup champion, but no, I don't think he's that good either.
No, it was.
Remember, he was in the American Hockey League before he joined the St. Louis Blues in 2019 and led them to the Cup. Unfortunately, and I don't want to take anything away from Jordan Binnington, but goaltenders can have runs like that. A hot goalie can lead you to a Stanley Cup, and we've seen that on multiple occasions. And Jordan Binnington and the St. Louis Blues is an example of that. And I remember when they extended him, I said to myself, that's a bad decision. I said that's, and then they traded away Ville Husso to the Detroit Red Wings, and suddenly their goaltending depth chart looks very weak. And that's a main reason why they're selling at the deadline and got all the assets that they have. But I don't think they're going to go in a full-on rebuild, to circle back to your question.
Yeah, no, that I can back you up on that. I can confirm that you said it wasn't a good contract at the time, and you were 100% right. So I can definitely back you up on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I stand up for my boys.
I'm pretty sure you didn't like the contract either at the time. I remember you weren't a fan of it either.
I was kind of in the middle. I'm just like, he just came off a cup. There's no sustained success in his career. Like, there's no history of it. I was kind of just like, it could be good, it could be bad. And I mean, obviously it's bad.
It's bad.
Oh, and because I forgot to mention this in the earlier in the intro, Evgeni Dadanov got traded from the Vegas Golden Knights to the Dallas Stars in exchange for Denis Gurianov. So
Montreal.
That happened.
Montreal.
Oh, excuse me, Montreal. I see all these guys. all these guys, like Vegas makes so many moves, I can't even keep track of anything anymore.
There's a lot of hockey that we had to prep for this episode.
Yeah, yesterday was just yesterday and the day before, just way too much to process.
But I'll tell you, I think Montreal did really well here getting Denis Gurianov. I mean, 4 goals in about 50 games for Evgeni Dadanov with the Canadiens, and Denis Gurianov, he has 9 points in 43 games. Pretty bad. But, I'll take you back to a player that the Dallas Stars gave up on a little bit early, and he became a Stanley Cup champion last year, Nichushkin. So, maybe the Canadiens, they're looking to get bright young forwards that they can, reclamation project types. Look at Kirby Dach when they acquired him at the draft. He's been really good for the Canadiens this year. So I think Gurianov could do some of the same. That's a nice pickup.
Yes, it is. So as we continue to truck along here, now that we're done with the big time trades, and I must emphasize this for now, we have some other possible trades. We've already hit on the Chychrun thing in the past, but a player in a very similar situation is Vladislav Gavrikov in Columbus, who, along with Chychrun being on a separate team, has also been held out of the lineup for over 2 weeks now. His last game was on February 11th. And I mean, obviously they want to keep him healthy. They don't want him to get injured because they want to move him for the best possible return that they can get. And I'm just going to go on a little bit of a rant here. When I am so sick and tired of players sitting, especially this season, for extended periods of time, long stretches for trade-related reasons. If I was Gary Bettman, the next time the CBA is up and it comes time to negotiate a new CBA, put a clause in the CBA that forces teams to not sit players well in advance of the trade deadline, especially when a trade is not imminent. If I was him, I would make it a clause to put you can only sit players up to 5 to 7 days before the trade deadline, because these two situations are utterly fucking ridiculous. There's no reason a player should be sitting out 2.5 to 3 weeks before the trade deadline on the sole basis that you want them to stay healthy for a possible trade. And in these two instances, there is no imminent trade. This is bullshit. You're basically okay. Let me finish, and then I will gladly throw it to you, because you do have pretty good counter arguments every time I say something. But this is not a good look on the league at all, and this is honestly making both the Blue Jackets and the Coyotes look like fools. And yeah, that's all I got. I know you had something to say about a potential Gavrikov trade that fell through, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, sorry for cutting you off.
No worries.
But what I was gonna say was that a trade was imminent with the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Boston Bruins. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, Jarmo Kekalainen, their general manager, was not happy. Their front office, according to 32 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman on the podcast, are not happy that this trade fell through, because they thought they had a verbal agreement on the trade, and the Bruins decided to move on at the last minute. But with that said, Shades, once the trade fell through, he should have been playing again. That's the thing. So yes, I totally agree with you with putting a cap on how many days you can keep a particular player out. And with Chychrun, I mean, I can make a little bit of a counter argument for Gavrikov. I can't make any counter argument for Jacob Chychrun. That's utterly ridiculous. But I will say this: it's well known around the league that this player has been shopped for a very, very long time now. But again, I think the league has to step in here and do something. And I think you made very good points in your rant, so no counter argument from me.
You did bring up a very good point, though, about Gavrikov, because I did, as I was ranting about that, I did forget about that, and I remembered at the very end, as soon as you were just like, oh, wait, hold on a second. That's when I remembered. But still, not a good look on the league. It's just, this is like, the only thing I can compare this to is the NBA resting players for load management, which I also can't stand. This little bit of a different reason here, but it's still, one, it's stupid. Two, not a good look on the league. And three, let's just say if neither one of these guys gets traded, what the hell was this all for?
And I think that there's a very good chance, Shades, that both of the players don't get traded.
Which is going to be an even worse look on the league.
Right. And according to 32 Thoughts, like Elliot Friedman said that Vladislav Gavrikov is very particular about where he wants to extend with the team, and only teams are only interested in giving up a first round pick for the player if they're able to extend him. And, let's say Nashville wants him, and Gavrikov doesn't want to go to Nashville, then they're not going to make that trade. So that could be potentially what's holding things up. But I think Gavrikov should step in here, and the player should be able to say, hey, play me, like team over player here, at least in this instance.
Yeah. And just to look at his point totals on the season and the last couple seasons, he's a defenseman who got a career high of 33 points last season with 5 goals and 28 assists. And he has 3 goals and 7 assists for 10 points so far this season in 52 games. So there definitely is a drop off there. But I mean, in terms of the Columbus Blue Jackets, he's a top 4 defenseman for them. And if they can get a first round pick out of him, good for them. It'll just go to it'll add on to what you said earlier about sellers getting great value in ahead of this year's trade deadline.
Agreed. 100%.
Man, this is so many things are just happening right now. Just way too many things. And all of this has happened, and we're still 4 days away from the trade deadline, which is just completely bonkers.
Absolutely insane.
So, moving on, before we end our podcast like we usually do with a full-on Rangers discussion, I know you wanted to bring up you wanted to bring up one thing and I wanted to bring up another thing. You wanted to bring up the Winnipeg Jets and how they've fallen off a little bit. The floor is yours.
Yeah, the Winnipeg Jets have really struggled in the last few games. And, most recently coming off of a shutout loss to the Islanders in Winnipeg. And I think they got booed off their own ice, I believe. They lost 5-1 at home again to Colorado this past Friday. They lost 2-1 to the Islanders away from home at UBS Arena. So that's 3 losses in a row. And of course, they beat our beloved New York Rangers. But if you look before that, they lost to the Devils. They lost to the Blue Jackets. They lost. Then they went on a 3-game winning streak. But then they lost to the Sabres, Predators, Flyers twice. So they've been really inconsistent for a while now. And, again, we've attested, Shades, to how weak the Central Division is, especially at the top. And I think this is a strong indication of that. And I think Dallas has really been struggling recently. They blew that game to Chicago last week on NHL on TNT. And Winnipeg, just like I said, their aforementioned struggles. So that's kind of where I'm at with them. Like we said at the beginning of the podcast, Rick Bowness is a very good head coach. So I have confidence that he'll be able to turn them around. And Nino Niederreiter, like we mentioned earlier, should help them.
Yeah.
And Connor Hellebuck is a fucking beast.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. I mean, that's a good way to put it.
He is insane.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're going to touch more upon this next episode, but the West overall is very weak and the East is pretty strong. But like I said, we're going to have even more reason to touch upon that next episode, which, oh man, this trade deadline might be very boring, but we shall see.
All the big moves might be made already.
What?
I said all the big moves might be made by the time the trade deadline day comes.
Yeah, literally. So going to the Eastern Conference, I know how we just said the West was weak as a whole. The Eastern Conference wild card, as we've touched upon, is also pretty weak compared to every other team holding a spot in a divisional playoff spot. And I mean, it again, the Eastern Conference wildcard race completely wide open. And the Penguins just waived Kasperi Kapanen, who was picked up by the St. Louis Blues. And I think they've won a couple in a row now, but it's still a hell of a race for the Eastern Conference wildcard because you literally have the Islanders, Penguins, Sabres, Red Wings, Panthers, and Capitals all within 5 points of each other. And the Penguins seem to have found a second wind. The Sabres right there, Red Wings right there, Panthers right there, even though I'm pretty sure, if my phone would load, that they've lost a couple in a row. Yes, they have. Well, they've lost 3 out of 5, 3 out of their last 5. So, yeah, completely open. Do I see either one of the 2 wildcard teams making a run? No, but this needs to be brought up. Well, I shouldn't say complete, but a pretty sizable drop off from the top 6 teams in the East to the 2 wildcard spots. You got anything to add to this?
I'm going to say it every single episode until the wild card is solidified in the Eastern Conference. The Buffalo Sabres. I want the Buffalo Sabres to make the playoffs. I'm ready for it. Pittsburgh has been very underwhelming. And of course, they've, inched towards potentially selling off of their roster. Again, they have 59 games played, 67 points. They trail the Islanders by 2 points for the first wild card spot. I think Detroit is in the race as well. Look, Detroit is going head to head with Ottawa in back-to-back games tonight and another day this week. So that could be a 4-point swing that could potentially push either team, further up the ladder. Washington, we just talked about, they're selling off. Again, Detroit's a young team. Florida, they've been extremely underwhelming. Buffalo, I really want to see in the playoffs, and I think the Islanders, unfortunately, are going to make the playoffs.
Oh, I'm going to pull it.
Mediocre this group is.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pull an Eric Cartman right here. Boo, New York Islanders, boo. Boo. All right. So, yeah, Eastern Conference wild cards wide open. I mean, this is going to be fun to keep an eye on over the remaining however many games. 19 to 24 games, depending on the team. You can look at the standings to know what I'm talking about, but it's going to be definitely something to keep an eye on. And who knows, we may get the Panthers and the Sabres of all teams. You just don't know. Could it be the Islanders and Pittsburgh and the Penguins who are currently in spots? Maybe. But like we said, complete wild card.
Yeah. It's complete upset. You never know what's going to happen. And I think Buffalo and Detroit, a young team, could get in. I think Florida could just catch a late wind late in the season and, push themselves up the ladder. Pittsburgh and the Islanders as well, and even Ottawa too. I think Philadelphia and Montreal and Columbus, I think it's a Bedard watch for them. But yeah.
Yep. I mean, I just want to end this season already just to see who gets in there and who loses first round, because that's probably what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Liam, after a what the viewers did not see as a lengthy break, we finish our podcast with our beloved New York Rangers. And just like the St. Louis Blues, there is a lot to talk about here. And let's start off first and foremost with the Vitaly Kravtsov trade. Vitaly Kravtsov has finally been traded. The Rangers traded Vitaly Kravtsov to the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for William Lockwood and a 2026 7th round pick. Now, William Lockwood is a 24-year-old player. He is also a right wing. He has basically bounced back and forth between the Canucks and the AHL over the past 3 seasons, including this one. He has 0 goals and 1 assist at the NHL level in 28 career games. You want to talk about selling low on a prospect. I think that's exactly what Chris Drury did here. But it was pretty obvious that he was going to get traded, and this was the unfortunate return that the Rangers got.
Right. And, the simple fact here, Shades, is that the value for Vitaly Kravtsov around the league, it wasn't high. The Rangers did not do a very good job of developing him, showcasing him to other teams, and proving why he would be a valuable asset and why another team should give up somebody of value. And, I don't know how much merit there is to this, but I don't know if you watched the Hockey Guy on YouTube, but he mentioned that
Sometimes.
the Rangers, the Rangers asked for Niels Höglander in exchange for Vitaly Kravtsov, and the Canucks said no way. And the Canucks had all the leverage in the trade, and that's why they were able to give up Lockwood. Lockwood's not a bad player. He's put up maybe 0.6 points per game in the AHL with the average for Canucks. So, again, a fringe NHL player, but it's still a player with a upside, 24 years old, a little bit undersized, but he could come and help the bottom six in the next couple of years. You never know. And a 7th-round pick is,
Oh yeah, the almighty 7th-round pick.
Second time this episode we mentioned the almighty 7th.
Hey, I mean, fucking 7th-round picks are essential, bro. If Steve Dangle has taught me anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, like you said, they did a terrible job at showcasing him. They clearly did not give him a fair chance because he should have been playing these last 2 years, and for whatever reason, especially this year, just for whatever reason, just wasn't. Whenever he was in the lineup, he would get scratched for no reason over other players. And, well, I mean, I'm actually kind of glad this trade finally happened. I really hope the kid flourishes in Vancouver because he desperately needed a fresh start with everything that the team has put him through the last 2 seasons.
And you know what? Vancouver is going to give him a good opportunity to play in the top 6, give him the minutes that he's been searching for ever since he entered the NHL. And, I think, going back to what I said, Shades, about other teams, not really wanting to give up a big time asset for this player. I think that there was a little bit of fear from around the league. And again, this is something that I was able to gain from Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts, that Vitaly Kravtsov might return to the KHL. So, teams still have that worry that, because Vitaly Kravtsov going back and playing for Tractor, he did that for a couple of years there in the first couple of years of his development with the Rangers. And, you never know at this point if he just would just say, screw it, I'm not getting the NHL playing time, I'll go back. But I think the situation matters in that context. And the situation is the Vancouver Canucks. And the matter of the fact is he'll have a chance to go there and either play with Elias Pettersson, who is having a bounce back season, an excellent season, or JT Miller, who is not a bad second line center himself. So Vitaly Kravtsov is going to have every single opportunity from the rest of the season, from here on out to the rest of the season, to prove why the Rangers should have given him another shot. But again, Rangers get a little bit of an underwhelming return, but I think Vancouver was one of the few teams that was interested and would give up anything worth anything of value. So.
Yep, and just to put this out there, Kravtsov, he gets a legitimate chance, as you said, to play with the Canucks. And like I said, I hope he does well. And he did have an interesting quote earlier this afternoon, or the quote might have been from yesterday. I didn't see the timestamp of when the thing was posted, but he basically said he's not really going to talk about his time here. Whatever happened here stays here. And that was pretty telling. I don't know if it was telling, but it was an interesting choice of words.
Well, I think Vitaly Kravtsov knows that, character matters in this league, and, front office, takes a look at that. And, the words that he uses to describe his time within the original 6 franchise, he should just have some trepidation in that. And I think he did right by holding back his words. And we all know what he meant, Shades. We can all read between the lines here.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly he has resentment towards the Rangers and the way that they developed them and the way that they, kind of eased them into the NHL level. And he just, he didn't want to come out right and say it and attack the team in this press conference. And I think that was the right thing to do on his part.
And lastly, you said about playing time. The only time he did get consistent playing time on the Rangers was down the stretch in Quinn's last season, where, I mean, let's be honest, as a 21-year-old at the time, he looked all right.
He looked decent.
Yep. Yeah, and then the Rangers traded Buchnevich, and then he just never got playing time after that, which that is still baffling to me. But hey, the trade is done.
Do you think that there's any correlation that 2 head coaches now in David Quinn and Gerard Gallant are not giving him chances? Because, I mean, that is telling to me.
No. Here's the thing. He did get a chance under Quinn.
But did he get a chance after Buchnevich was traded?
No, because that happened. Because Quinn was the last season of Buchnevich. Remember?
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Yeah. Trust me, I have that whole trade ingrained in my head. So
bad memory.
So I mean, yeah, whatever. It's all good. I have my hiccups every episode, as you very well know. But yeah, no, I feel like, just to cap this off, he's been traded. Final thoughts. I mean, it seemed clear to me that Gallant never really saw anything in him, and he clearly did not get a fair shot for, as I've mentioned earlier, about 5 minutes ago. But yeah, the trade is done. I wish him well. And as a young player who I actually saw potential in 2 years ago, I hope he proves the Rangers wrong.
Yeah. I mean, and he very well might prove the Rangers wrong, you never know. And again, he's still a young player. He's still 23 years old. He's got good NHL size, 6'3", 186, and in 28 games this season, 6 points, 3 goals, 3 assists. But you know what? He's going to have a chance to go on that, possibly on that number 1 or number 2 power play unit. The Canucks are a team that are shopping wingers like Brock Besser. So if Brock Besser gets moved out, then suddenly Vitaly Kravtsov's placement on the depth chart will change. But again, former Ranger, I hope the best for him. But again, like I've said in past episodes, he just did not fit the timeline of where this team is at right now. And if it came down to acquiring Patrick Kane and having Vitaly Kravtsov be a cap casualty, or keeping Kravtsov around and not playing him, that's what it comes down to me. I know Kravtsov is not making a lot of money, but let's call it a spade here. The reason why the Rangers traded Vitaly Kravtsov was so they could get his contract off of the books.
Yep. And which leads into,
so they could bring in Patrick Kane.
Yeah, getting Kravtsov's roster off the books, which leads into their quote unquote roster management, which, oh boy, I mean, look, I said earlier, we're recording this on Monday, February 27th. Yesterday, Sunday, I mean, oh boy, there were so many things racing through my head during the game yesterday against LA that I was driving myself nuts. But the main thing that happened during the game yesterday was Braden Schneider and Ryan Carpenter being forced to dress per the CBA rules. That part I don't have a problem with. And then Schneider not getting a single shift. Carpenter, the game plan for him going into the game was to also not get any ice time whatsoever. Then, obviously, the K'Andre Miller spit take at Drew Doughty, which is, 1, not a good look. 2, stupid decision, accidental or not. He could face a possible suspension on that, by the way. The last time it happened, there was a 3-game suspension, so that's something to keep in mind, especially with Lindgren being day-to-day and having to dress 18 players. But what happened after K'Andre Miller did that was, of all people, Ryan Carpenter served the penalty and technically got ice time out of it, completely negating not playing him for cap reasons, which, at that on the spot as that happened, I was scratching my head going, you got to send somebody else to the box. You can't make that mistake in a game. Now,
Yeah,
if Miller does in fact get suspended, I don't know exactly how that correlates to the salary cap, but right as I throw it to you right now, you have to put somebody else in the box there with what the team was trying to accomplish salary cap wise.
I agree with you, Shades. You have to put somebody else in the box there. And I can't get into Gerard Gallant's mind and try to understand why Ryan Carpenter would be the player of his choosing. And as far as playing Braden Schneider, but keeping him out, again, it's just having the necessary number of roster players, but not wanting the player to get injured. And, we saw the next day that Braden Schneider was sent down to the American Hockey League, and we all know what is coming. The Rangers are accruing as much cap space as possible at this point in the next couple of days prior to the trade deadline to acquire Patrick Kane. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. As far as Keandre Miller, if you take a look at the replay, it kind of looks like Miller was trying to just, a normal hockey spit, right? Just trying to spit downwards, but obviously caught Drew Doughty in the face. And, I think it's telling that in Keandre Miller's statement, he said that he apologized to Drew Doughty, and the report came out, I believe, by Dan Rosen that said that Drew Doughty was receptive to his apology. Kind of makes me think that Drew Doughty knows that this was not malicious on the part of Keandre Miller, but again, he spit in his face. It's on video, and I think the NHL kind of has to realize that this is a cut and dry situation, intentional or not. I think it's probably going to be a 1-game suspension, especially since he's getting a hearing, and that usually precludes a suspension on the part of the player. So,
yeah, no, look, I may not like Drew Doughty, but the stuff that some people were saying on Twitter yesterday about him was just, I mean, Ranger fans, you got to be better than that. That's all I'm going to say. I mean,
what were they saying about him? I didn't see.
Let's just say I saw one tweet that said Doughty probably used a racial slur and that's why Miller spit on him. I saw that and I just went, why the hell would you tweet that? If that would have happened, we would have saw a reaction out of somebody in the moment, which we clearly did not. So that clearly did not happen. The stupidity of that person to tweet it is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's dumb, and it's bringing the race card into a situation where it doesn't warrant it. And I think I think Keandre Miller's statement would have been a lot different if that were the case.
Yes.
And you have to think better of NHL players, and you got to look at who is involved in this current situation, Shades. I mean, Drew Doughty, is a stand-up individual. He is an NHL veteran. He's been in the league for a long time. He's been one of the best players, as best defenseman in the league for a long time. And you know what? When you are a top-end player in this league, you have a certain standard to uphold, not only on the ice, but off the ice, just character-wise. And Drew Doughty upholds that. And I don't know why any Ranger fan would try to insinuate that his remarks were going to come off as racist in any way. And I think there's a lot of mutual respect between Drew Doughty and Keandre Miller. And the fact that Drew Doughty accepted his apology, I think speaks volumes to the fact that there is no animosity or bad blood between the two individuals.
Exactly. Could not have said it any better myself. And just because I brought up the last time a spit situation happened in the league was Garnet Hathaway in 2019. I forgot who he spit at, but it resulted in a 3-game suspension. Now, by rule, I don't remember. I don't think it was. But by rule, spitting in someone or in someone's face or at someone in general is an automatic game misconduct. So that part, not going to argue about any one bit. It was a poorly timed decision, and like we said, no animosity between the two, which is a great sign. But the NHL, they had to suspend him. You have to uphold the rule at that point.
Yep.
I mean, excuse me, they had to give him a game misconduct, not suspend him.
Yeah, and I think that they probably will suspend him. But the game misconduct had to happen. And I think, in the moment too is telling, because Keandre Miller was adamant, when the referees were coming over to kick him out of the game or give him that game misconduct. He was like, no, that's not what I was, intending to do. I think if you were, guilty in that situation, I think he would have put up a little bit less of a fight. But again, I hope Miller's in the lineup for the next game. And I hope he directs his spit in the correct direction next time.
That's funny. Yeah,
Yes.
and just lastly, if there was a malicious intent, in my personal opinion, I think there would have been a full-on brawl during the game, which clearly didn't happen. So
Agreed.
I think we can all take this at face value and say it was completely accidental.
100%.
Now, to stay on K'Andre Miller for uno secondo, you and I were talking about this and kind of have been talking about this like off the podcast for a couple weeks now. The pairing of K'Andre Miller and Jacob Trouba are having very noticeable defensive woes, and it's getting concerning to the point that because of how consistently and how frequently it's happening. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I look at the entire defense core as a whole, and I think I look at the top pairing of Fox and Lindgren. Now Lindgren is injured. You don't know how long he's going to take before he's back on the ice full time. You have Adam Fox, who is an outstanding offensive player, terrific hockey IQ. The defensive side of the puck, he's good. He's above average, but lately, he hasn't really been like a number one defenseman, at least on the defensive side. I think we can agree on that. But Jacob Trouba, but just because of that, because Fox is not otherworldly defensively, and because now Ryan Lindgren is not healthy, that second pairing is now circled. Trouba and Miller, and they've been struggling all season. I love K'Andre Miller. It's easy to be enamored by his size, just his character. I mean, he's just a likable player. I mean, his offensive ability as well. But sometimes you just have to call it what it is, despite how much you like the player. And despite how much I like K'Andre Miller, his defensive play this season in his own end has been atrocious. Now, can you attribute some of that to Jacob Trouba? Yes. But can you also look at Jacob Trouba and attribute some of his defensive troubles to K'Andre Miller? You can also do that as well. So the second pairing as a whole is a black hole for me. And you look at two games ago against the Washington Capitals. I mean, they were just atrocious. I mean, it was the worst pairing on the ice, Shades, and it wasn't even close for either team. And then you look at the third pairing, Nico Mikkola. Nico Mikkola is a good skater. He has good size, but he hasn't been with the Rangers for a very long time. And Gerard Gallant, Chris Drury, and whoever's making those decisions is pairing him up with a young Braden Schneider. Those are bound to have some issues. And now Braden Schneider's being sent down to Hartford. The team is distracted. Mikkola is paired with Ben Harper, who hadn't been in the lineup prior to his game against Washington, where he came in as an extra forward for 15 plus games. So the Rangers are in a little bit of a, topsy-turvy situation, but just the whole defensive woes. I think if the Rangers don't win the Stanley Cup and they don't meet their expectation, should they acquire Patrick Kane, you'll look at that defense and you'll specifically look at that second pairing as to why.
And I'm actually glad you brought that up, because in terms of Patrick Kane, the trade to the Rangers looks like all but a formality at this point. You sent me a tweet while we were on our mini break. Thank God the power of editing exists. And you sent me that Vancouver was possibly clearing cap space for Patrick Kane. And right away, the light bulb went off. Aha, they are the third team in this trade. Will that be true? Maybe. Could it be another team? Also possible. But like you just said, if the Rangers do in fact pull this off, because they just sent Schneider down to Hartford for cap purposes, if this trade does in fact happen and the Rangers do not win the cup, in my personal opinion, anything less than a Stanley Cup win will be considered a colossal failure on the season. But that's another story for later in the season / playoffs. But yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, well, as far as Patrick Kane, the trade is all but a formality, and I'm certainly hoping that the deal gets completed. Every passing day, it's like, all right, When's it going to happen here? And, like I said earlier in the podcast, I know what Chris Drury is trying to do. You know what Chris Drury is trying to do. Us Ranger fans all know they're taking the necessary days to accrue as much cap space as possible to bring in the player. And as far as expectations after Kane comes in, look, there's a lot of things at play, Shades. I just mentioned the top 6 defense and how it might be a little bit wonky on the defensive side of the puck. Igor Shesterkin, I'm sure we'll talk about him in a little bit, but it hasn't been Igor Shesterkin's necessarily best year, especially after last year where he was otherworldly. The forward group, Trocheck is starting to mesh, which is great. Panarin looks awesome. Zibanejad on both sides of the puck. Kreider is Kreider. He'll help on the power play. Vladimir Tarasenko, you mentioned it to me prior to the podcast, Shades. I mean, I'll let you go first. I mean, tell me what you've seen out of Tarasenko, or lack of what you've seen out of the player. I mean,
yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I have not been overly enamored with Vladimir Tarasenko since the trade. He looked good playing with Panarin, but ever since Gallant moved him away from Panarin, he has kind of just been there. I'll be completely honest with you. I mean, I was expecting more.
Yeah. And do you think Gallant moved him away from Panarin and put him with Kreider and Zibanejad because he got word from the front office that Patrick Kane is coming?
Maybe.
And because Kane has to play with Panarin. He has to. I mean, I've seen some people on Rangers Twitter that have said that that Kane would be better fit playing with Zibanejad and Kreider, and that is crazy to me. I don't know about you. I mean, if you're bringing this player in, you're playing him with number 10, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But now the problem becomes if Tarasenko continues to be underwhelming, I should say, playing with Zibanejad and Kreider, this could that trade could be very underwhelming.
Yeah, it could. And, I think you look back to the trade return that the Rangers gave up for Vladimir Tarasenko in the first place, and it wasn't that much. And, I think it will be a little bit easier to eat if, A, the Rangers don't meet expectations, and B, Tarasenko isn't really necessarily a big part of their success. So, again, only time will tell. But as far as Patrick Kane coming into the team, he's going to provide such a much needed boost into the Rangers lineup. I'm a little bit worried about how it affects the team defensively because, again, I think it all goes back to the defense. I think this team can score with anybody. I think Igor Shesterkin can outmatch any goaltender. But defensively, I don't know. Patrick Kane is not going to race back on the back check. This is a 34-year-old Patrick Kane with a hip issue, So just got to remember that. Keep that in mind. And I haven't been enamored by Tarasenko's defensive play either. So, and we all know about how Panarin struggles in his own zone. So suddenly, as much offensive talent as you have up front, there are some liabilities there. There just are.
Yeah, but if Patty Kane does in fact come in, which is very much looking like it's going to happen, I think you have to play him with Panarin based on their previous chemistry and success with playing with each other. And that will all but solidify the top 9. And then the fourth line hopefully meshes a little bit more down the stretch, which I've kind of liked what I've seen from them when it's been Mott, Goodrow, and Vesey down there. So that's good sign for me. So good signs for me so far. I like what I'm seeing, but you're right. The defense does have to get it together. And frankly speaking, like you just said, Patrick Kane is not a great defensive player. You could argue he's not even a good defensive player. And if the Rangers keep playing defensively like they are, that is an issue that is going to be unsolved come the trade deadline.
Right. And, if you look at a potential first round matchup against the New Jersey Devils, my concern with New Jersey is not putting the puck in the back of the net past them. My concern with New Jersey is keeping it out of ours.
Exactly.
Their speed and the way that they play, you cannot afford to be anything less than stellar in your own zone.
Exactly. And just lastly, speaking of not being the best in our own zone, I just wanted to, because you brought this up a couple of minutes ago, I needed to bring up Igor Shesterkin's play this season because it has let's be honest, it's been a little all over the place. And the fact that it's dragging this far into the season is raising a major red flag. While I'm not ready to hit the panic button yet, especially after what he showed against LA yesterday, it's something that is going to be kept in the, I'm not even going to say the back of my mind. I'm going to say the front of my mind, because we are 60 something games into the season right now. And he doesn't look anywhere near as good as he did last season. Now, granted, the team is frankly not been playing good defensively at all lately. There's 22 games left in the season for the Rangers, by the way. But team hasn't been playing that good defensively lately. And you could clearly tell that he's not playing anywhere near the level he was last season. Because last year he was consistently a runaway Vezina candidate. And this season, he has been pretty much anything but that.
Right. And, let's take a look at the statistics, shall we, with Igor?
Yes.
Last year, he had a 2.07 goals against average and a 935 save percentage. For me, Shades, that is the outlier. Look at 2020, 2021, which is his first, I guess, full season, and I guess half a season in the NHL, played 35 games, but he had a 916 save percentage, a 2.62 goals against. You fast forward to this year, 910 save percentage, 2.65 goals against. So that's kind of more on par with where I think Igor Shesterkin's going to be for the rest of his career. And I think it's unfair to kind of judge Igor after coming off a season where he almost had a 940 save percentage. A 940 save percentage. That is absolutely insane. We have not seen that out of a goaltender since what, 2010 Carey Price, right?
Think so.
So, I mean, any dip in performance, I mean, he was expected to have a dip in performance, and, it's obviously going to come to the surface, but I'm not going to excuse him. I mean, he hasn't been great. Don't get me wrong. He's certainly had his fair share of soft goals. There have been games that the Rangers have lost because of Igor Shesterkin, but let's also not forget that there are games that the Rangers have won because of Igor Shesterkin. So I think it's a give and a take. And I think as long as he is the Igor he was last year, or at least close to it, come playoff time in April, I don't really care what happened in the regular season.
Yeah, and because you brought up his save percentage from 2 years ago, I was giving him credit for having a 916 save percentage during that particular season, because that was like basically not peak rebuild, but that was right after peak rebuild. Which is to have a 916 save percentage on a team that bad. I mean, that's kind of good.
It is. And the year before he came in 2019-20, I believe that was prior to the bubble. In 12 starts, he went 10-2-0, and he had a 932 save percentage, 2.52 goals against. So, it's been pretty good for a long time. And, I think we talked about earlier, Shades, that the Rangers had very big defensive issues and big holes on the back end. And I think Igor Shesterkin's play is a consequence of that. And I think because you're not getting the best out of K'Andre Miller and Jacob Trouba, quite frankly, you're not getting the best defensively out of Adam Fox. Nico Mikkola comes into a new system in the middle of the season. I think that can be part of the reason why Shesterkin has struggled. He's facing a lot more grade A scoring chances than he was last season, and that's telling because the Rangers gave up a lot of grade A scoring chances last year, but even more this year because that's how porous they've been defensively. If the Rangers had played defensively this season like they did last year, I think they'd be close to first in the Metro. I really would.
See, the funny part about this is the team the last 5 or 6 games, whatever it's been, I'm pretty sure it's 5. They've looked a lot more like the team last year, which I don't like. I thought they've looked much better up to this previous last several games here this season than last season. But they definitely do have to get it together. Go ahead.
Sorry. For me, Jacob Trouba's play is the biggest difference between last year and this year. Trouba was serviceable last year. This year, it's just he has really fallen off a cliff.
Defensively, really yes.
Defensively, yes.
Yeah. So like you and I both agree on, Shesterkin's play 100% not anywhere near the level of last season, which was definitely a special season. But the team in front of him also needs to step it up, especially defensively.
Yes.
Because how many
100%.
times have we seen that bite teams in the ass in the playoffs?
It'll be their downfall. If the Rangers don't win the Stanley Cup, that'll be the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty obvious reason. So, yeah, I mean, holy crap, what an episode. I mean, we definitely did lose a lot of steam there because there was just so much to unpack and so much to talk about. But thank God we took our little break because we were able to get a little bit of energy back, which I'm happy about. Also had some baked ziti while I was waiting for you.
There you go.
That always does the trick.
I had some air fried chicken nuggets.
Ooh.
I was not using the stovetop because we don't need a repeat.
Oh God. Yeah, we'll leave this off, but let's just say Liam had to step out for a period of time that was longer than he would have liked. Let's just leave it at that.
Indeed.
Yeah, so this is my second coffee. Surprisingly, I did not finish this yet, but I hope everyone enjoyed this insanely packed episode. Liam, I hope you enjoyed, even with the hiccup there.
I did enjoy it. I enjoy every single episode of Pucks and Brews. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, I'm excited for the trade deadline. There was a lot to unpack. I think we got through everything. So, and also, I think there was one thing we forgot.
Hit me.
The rumor is Matthias Ekholm to the Edmonton Oilers. So just keep an eye on that.
I will keep an eye on that indeed. And I also saw something about Erik Karlsson saying that the Sharks GM, I think it's Mike Grier.
Yep, came from the Rangers.
Yeah, Mike Grier. Erik Karlsson said that Grier has not asked him to waive his either no move or no trade, whatever it is. So I think that's a telling sign that Karlsson could very well be possibly staying in San Jose. But we still have 4 more days until the trade deadline at the time of recording, 3 days from this episode being out. And yeah, I mean, Liam, this very well could be a very, very boring trade deadline day. But at the same time, the Rangers could very well get Patrick Kane in the NHL's worst kept secret. So if/when that does happen, you and I are both going to be right back here wearing our Rangers jerseys, and we're going to celebrate.
Absolutely. And, you see those Ranger fans out there at the Kings game on Sunday wearing Patrick Kane jerseys?
I did see that.
A Reebok Patrick Kane jersey. Oh, my goodness.
Reebok, please come back and make the jerseys.
Well, Adidas' contract ends after this year.
That's breaking piece of news right there. Come on, Reebok, make your comeback, God damn it.
Yeah, Reebok jerseys were great. But again, I'm off topic a little bit, but I'm really excited.
It's the outro. It's all good.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. And yeah, I hope Patrick Kane becomes a Ranger in the next couple of days. They've been making this move, and we'll see. We'll see what the return is.
Yes, and you and I are going to be very happy if/when it does happen. So that is all for this episode of Pucks and Brews, episode number 37, which is a very polarizing number for some reason. But episode number 37, 3 and 7, 2 of my favorite numbers, and can't wait to record again in like 4 days. Can't wait to record again in 4 days from today. Hope everyone enjoyed a drink of choice. We will see you next episode, and trade deadline's right around the corner. Woohoo!